This is Lavi and Rose. Hi there. You seem to have caught me on a dirty Parisian street. I was on my way to meet the hooker I'm in love with and give her a copy of this book. But she just told me, as a matter of fact, that she's going to be occupied for the next couple hours. So why don't you and I go sit down at that cafe over there and have a little talk about it, all right? Hello all, my name is Marley. Hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be talking about a book called Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller. And to talk about Tropic of Cancer, we're going to have to talk about Henry Miller for reasons that we're going to get into later. But first, just to start things off, some of you may wonder, what is Tropic of Cancer? It doesn't, I believe, receive too much attention nowadays. There might be some circles who are still interested in it. But for those of you who are not familiar, I have a great answer for you. It's
pornographies.
And it's actually pretty good. Tropic of Cancer is a work that feels legitimately difficult to catalog or define, especially by today's literary standards. It's a work that was written with the express intent to shock, outrage, and disgust its readers. And at this it did succeed. It was written in the 1930s, and it would not be published in the United States for another 30 years due to violating pretty much every obscenity law on the books at the time. Now, in reading this, when I say, oh, this book was so offensive, like, it kind of is and it kind of isn't, because I feel like nowadays when you read something that was shocking or outrageous back in the day, you tend not to be all that shocked or outraged. After all, we are now living in a post-WAP world. These things don't surprise us anymore. Now, what makes Tropic of Cancer worth discussing today is that it remains a very interesting and I would say valuable read, despite, or perhaps because of, passages like this. The plot doesn't matter. It kind of follows the same loop for most of the book. It goes philosophical musing, Henry Miller trying to get food, Henry Miller's friend saying some of the most vile shit you've ever heard in your entire life, and then, about 10 more pages of Henry Miller and that same friend giving Parisian whores exquisitely detailed Yelp reviews, basically. Many of the passages in this book kind of go something like this.
Ah, yes, it's me, Henry Miller. I'm living in Paris. Do you remember that whore, Paulette? Yes, she was exquisite. She hangs out on the corner of the Rue de Saint-Ghislain, and for 5 francs, the low price of 5 francs, she will gladly suck the soul out of your and she'll do it with a...
Yeah, that's basically the plot of Tropic of Cancer. Nothing really happens. You're reading it for the words, not for the events. And yes, you heard correctly, Henry Miller is the main character of Tropic of Cancer. He wrote semi-autobiographical novels. He would fictionalize his own life and the people in it, string them together into a book. And the tradition of people like Proust, Joyce, or Celine. But Henry Miller's work tends, in practice, to feel pretty different from those authors because he blends a lot of different genres. There's amateur philosophy, it's that day-by-day slice of life stuff, and a lot of sex. Really, a lot of sex. All this comes together in a sort of weirdly fictionalized memoir that is more lie than truth. Because if you are to learn one thing from watching this channel, it is to be that authors love to lie, and they love to lie about nothing more than their lives. In Tropic of Cancer, I think about like 4 pages in, Henry Miller lies about his writing process for writing Tropic of Cancer. He's like, oh no, bro, I'm not gonna change a word of what I put down. I'm just that good. I'm writing this good first try. Yeah, he rewrote this book like 4 times. As a side note, semi-autobiographical should be the default term. I'm increasingly believing that there's no such thing as an autobiography. That people exaggerate, especially about their own lives. Henry Miller, you're lying. You did not fuck all those women. My experience of reading Tropic of Cancer was one of a pretty unique kind of astonishment. I was wildly oscillating between just awe of how straight-faced Miller could be about being an awful person and how genuinely beautiful some of the passages in this book can be. And before we go any further, I should say that Henry Miller has been the subject of extensive study and extensive writing as well. All this is to say, if you're interested in Henry Miller, after watching this video, I would recommend checking out Tropic of Cancer and then reading something by someone who knows a lot more than I do. What makes Tropic of Cancer worth talking about today, I think, is kind of a twofold thing. First off, I think it explores the very trenches of masculinity in a very interesting way. And I also think that the shift in public perception of the book over the work is really worth talking about. I mean, after all, art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is born out of its circumstances, and then as those circumstances change, we continue to react to it. And there are very few works out there which have had the swings in public perception that Tropic of Cancer has had. Again, banned in the US for 30 years, then in the 60s, that sort of like free love, hippy-dippy shit, sort of brings the book back. After free love, feminist movement begins, I believe, sometime around the 1970s, and that increased critical perspective on the book really brings it down. Like, people do not want to read this book because of how misogynist it is. I really want to hammer that point home, that this is an incredibly misogynist work of art, and it's not just like your ordinary, like, hoo-hoo ha-ha. It's incredibly cruel and demeaning to women, which is interesting also to me because of all of the work that it did in undoing those obscenity laws. Increasingly graphic sexual material began to be published in the United States because of books like Tropic of Cancer, which means that it's kind of the forerunner of a lot of the romantasy stuff that you see lining bookshelves today. Yeah, you could say that this is actually a little bit of a romantasy novel, folks, except in Tropic of Cancer, the only monster doing any fucking is the author. Now, the video title is a little clickbaity, if that's even a thing. I don't know if clickbait's still a thing. People's brains are so rotted at this point. But I do think that Tropic of Cancer is still a valuable read because in the best of times, being a man is fucking confusing. That's not to say that it hasn't always been confusing, you know, as far back as the fucking Stone Ages, but like, look at this. Something's not right here. Now, Tropic of Cancer, if you want to read it critically, if you want to read it with a little bit of that psychoanalysis lens on, if you want to analyze Henry Miller a little bit, it lends itself to some very interesting interpretations. In fact, it becomes almost this perfect guidebook on how not to be a man. I also think that the prose in Tropic of Cancer is legitimately fun to read. It flows off the page more often than it doesn't. Here are some examples of prose from the first 100 or so pages that I liked, and these are all taken from different sections. I recall distinctly how I enjoyed my suffering. It was like taking a cub to bed with you. Once in a while he clawed you, and then you were really frightened. Ordinarily you had no fear. You could always turn him loose or chop his head off. The universe has dwindled. It is only a block long and there are no stars, no trees, no rivers. The people who live here are dead. They make chairs which other people sit on in their dreams. The monstrous thing is not that men have created roses out of this dung heap, but that, for some reason or other, they should want roses. For some reason or other, man looks for the miracle, and to accomplish it, he will wade through blood. He will debauch himself with ideas. He will reduce himself to a shadow, if for only 1 second of his life he can close his eyes to the hideousness of reality. There is a reason, besides the prose, that I think we should talk about this book, but to get to that reason, we are going to have to meet Henry Miller, because I want you all to understand something very vitally important about this dude. He was a funny man, but he was not joking. Why talk about the author? Computer, pull up the quote from Henry Miller directly responding to criticism of Tropic of Cancer, please. Before we talk about Henry Miller, I want to make it clear. I liked Tropic of Cancer, and I do think it's worth a read. That being said, I'm going to make fun of this guy. I'm going to be lampooning him because, by today's standards, he sucked in a lot of ways. Now, am I interested in digging him up and castrating him for not being a perfect man? No, I'm not interested in that. That's not really productive. I just feel like these things are worth mentioning. And with that out of the way, we're going to be continuing on here. I read this biography of Henry Miller, and it was one of the funniest biographies I ever read because even someone who liked Henry Miller enough to write and research a full-length biography about him, and believe me, there's a lot of reading you have to do to make this happen. Even someone who liked Henry Miller enough to do that cannot help themselves from expressing pure, like, astonishment and disgust at some of the decisions he made in his life. So keep that in mind. Here are some of my favorite Henry Miller stories, because there's just so many. Henry Miller, before he had published anything noteworthy, he would write letters and address them to posterity. Getting balls on this guy. Henry Miller also put a lot of stock in phrenology. One of his earliest brushes with phrenology was when he paid a phrenologist in Times Square to feel his head in the hopes that the bumps on his skull would be the bumps of a genius. Sadly, this particular phrenologist felt that he was better suited to be an architect or a good lawyer. Now, I don't know if this phrenologist was a quack phrenologist or not, but phrenology does make it in to Tropic of Cancer. Miller digresses at length about the shapes of American skulls. Now, as we all know, there is no better sign of a healthy mind and a healthy spirit than a belief in phrenology. Henry Miller developed the belief not only that everything he did was interesting, but that he was really, really good at everything that he did. In letters he would write, he would brag about how great he was at not pissing his wife off. I feel like that should have been the default, man. Additionally, Miller has been documented as giving at least two women, could have been more, he gave them copies of this book, Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. This was his idea of courtship. I mean, can you fucking imagine? Thank you again for agreeing to meet me for coffee. Things have been a little rough for me since the divorce, and it's really exciting just to get the chance to meet someone new. First off, though, have you ever read East of Eden? Also, he did not write anything worthwhile until he was like 40 years old, and that's actually pretty inspirational, you know, to me. It's kind of like, hey, I stuck at it, I kept working, and I did put out something that I'll be remembered for. But he would not have been able to do that if not for the support of his wives who would work for him, bringing home money so he could continue to just pluck away at the typewriter. And I mention this because he cheated on every single one of his wives, 5 of them, and he had significant affairs outside of those marriages with at least 2 women. So, good job, Henry. You made something of yourself. As a side note, I'm not going to talk about Anais Nin. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. That is in the running for the most famous love affair in all of literary history. There are thousands of pages alone documenting and commenting on their affair. I don't have the expertise. We're not going to do it. But I do think this particular passage is very funny when you consider that Henry and Anais were at Anais's parents' house, and Henry was at least 40 years old at the time. Now, to round out our portrait of Henry Miller, this is a story about his writing process that I think is particularly illuminating. One of the first books that he wrote, which didn't get published for a long time because it wasn't very good, it was called Crazy Cock. This book was the, fictionalized account of his wife's affair with another woman. And he wrote this book a couple times. One time he was, rewrote a draft and he gave it to a friend. And that friend said, well, in this situation, based on the book, surely the husband is at fault here, right? Like, surely the husband is the bad guy in this situation. He had to be really awful for his wife to leave him for a woman. So Henry Miller got this feedback. And you know what he said? He said, that is a grievous misinterpretation of my work. And he went back in and he was like, I gotta rewrite this so everyone knows that the women are at fault here. The women can't get away with it! Henry Miller did not want to write a book where women were in the clear. Just remember that as we go back to talking about Tropic of Cancer. Tropic of Cancer is a book that was written by a man who was obsessed with himself. But he wasn't just obsessed with himself, he was also obsessed with how to make other people obsessed with himself. So one thing he would do is he would write reviews of his own work, and he would publish them in newspapers under the names of friends. He was obsessed with creating his own myth. So what we need to understand about Tropic of Cancer is that it is not a book that is about 100% factually who Henry Miller actually was. It is a book about who Henry Miller wanted to be. Now, why is Tropic of Cancer still worth reading today? Well, it's not because the hedonism, the misogyny, and the brutality on every page are worth taking at face value. It's because to my ears, there is a screaming. Audibly, you can hear it just underneath the surface of this book. The book is a study of masculinity in crisis, despite the fact that that's kind of the exact opposite reading that Miller wanted the book to have. There is this huge gap between the Miller of Tropic Cancer and the Miller of real life. And that gap is named in this book. That gap's the hunger. The sensation of hunger feels like it pops up every couple pages in Tropic of Cancer. One thing the book will often do is it will break off mid-thought. It'll just trail off. And when it does this, sometimes Miller will just start talking about how hungry he is or where he's going to go get lunch that day. Or, maybe he'll just talk about how nice it is to eat. Hunger is omnipresent in Tropic of Cancer. So what is the hunger? Hunger in Tropic of Cancer is this gnawing, desperate feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach when you realize late at night that you are not all that you could have been. Many other people have used hunger as a rhetorical device, and many more have analyzed it, probably a lot more professionally. Right now, I'm going to read 2 quotes to you that I think will really help us get a grasp of Miller's version of the hunger. When men learn to create a false self as a way to maintain male domination, they have no sound basis on which to build healthy self-esteem. To always wear a mask as a way of asserting masculine presence is to always live the lie, to be perpetually deprived of an authentic sense of identity and well-being. Disconnection is not fallout from traditional masculinity. Disconnection is masculinity. The will to change bell hooks. I realized in the last video I told you to put down the bell hooks. I should not have done that. You gotta pick the bell hooks back up. Pick it up off the ground now. Finally, here's a quote from Tropic of Cancer. I should do nothing else but concentrate on food. That would prevent me from falling to pieces. It's not just about the food. The hunger is Miller's almost definitely subconscious acknowledgement that he is not fulfilled, not in any real way. But there's no pathway for him to fix that. The Miller of Tropic of Cancer is completely cut off from any path to becoming a better person. He's too much in debt to the hunger. It gets him out of bed. It moves him from place to place. It's what keeps his life going. The hunger, it's all-encompassing. To me, it explains his sexual addiction, his distaste for the people he surrounds himself with, and rarely does it ever vanish, but when it does, it really illuminates the rest of the book, like it does in the concert passage. So, Miller's avatar, about halfway through this book, he attends a concert. He bums a ticket somehow. I think he actually might find it in a urinal stall, because obviously at this point in his life, he could not afford a ticket to a concert all on his own. But when he goes to this concert, he has this transcendent euphoric experience. It's by far the, I want to say, purest and most happy passage in the entire book. My mind is curiously alert. It's as though my skull had 1,000 mirrors inside it. My nerves are taut, vibrant. The notes are like glass balls dancing on a million jets of water. I've never been to a concert before on such an empty belly. Nothing escapes me, not even the tiniest pin falling. It's as though I had no clothes on, and every pore of my body was a window, and all the windows open, and the light flooding my gizzards. I can feel the light curving under the vault of my ribs, and my ribs hang there over a hollow nave, trembling with reverberations. How long this lasts, I have no idea. I have lost all sense of time and place. After what seems like an eternity, there follows an interval of semi-consciousness, balanced by such a calm that I feel a great lake inside me. A lake of iridescent sheen, cool as jelly, and over this lake, rising in great swooping spirals, there emerge flocks of birds of passage with long, slim legs and brilliant plumage. Near the end of the book, Miller does a little bit of a play on Joyce. He sort of reverses a portrait of the artist as a young man. There is this passage where Miller's avatar gets to go to a school to teach. He gets a job at some remote place away from Paris, so he has to leave behind all of his friends, all the drinking, all the whoring. And he goes there to teach, and he's pretty isolated. Now, in A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, when Stephen Dedalus goes off to school, it's a point of self-reflection. His life begins to change. So theoretically, this same opportunity should be offered to Miller. He gets a chance to really think about his life, really consider who he is and who he wants to be. That chance is there for him to take it. I mean, he's just teaching and then, isolated the rest of the time. That's what isolation does. Isolation invites reflection, which is why it makes us all go insane. Miller gets a chance to think about his life, about what might be wrong with it, about why he feels the need to fill this void up with all these hedonist pleasures. Do you know what happens when Henry Miller's character gets isolated in Tropic of Cancer? He throws it away. He throws it away almost immediately. He physically cannot take the sensation of being alone. He feels like he's in a prison. He salivates at the thought of getting back to all the drinking and all the whoring and all his friends whose couches he can sleep on and whose meals he can eat for free. And frankly, I kind of get it. Henry Miller, like many other people nowadays, frankly like me sometimes, he couldn't handle self-reflection, and at every turn he chose disconnection. He chose to grow and grow into becoming an anti-intellectualist the older he got in real life. He lived his life in total pursuit of the self, at all costs, and that's what Tropic of Cancer showcases. Total pursuit of the self at all costs. There are so many people out there who want to sell you on the right way to be a man. And ultimately, what am I? I'm a failed actor with a YouTube channel. Taking masculinity advice from me would be a comedic joke. To be honest, I'm not really interested in doing that either. I think there's an infinite amount of ways, let's be real, an infinite amount of ways to be a complete healthy man. You can explore those methods as best you can, whatever you feel comfortable with. I do think, however, that at least in my view, Henry's experience of masculinity is an incorrect version of it. And I realize that may sound silly to say to some of you, and frankly, it'll probably sound silly a year from now. I mean, who knows with how fast culture moves nowadays, if anything's really correct anymore. But that unflinching portrayal of masculinity in a really deep place of crisis, I think is what makes the work today. I mean, Let's be clear here. This is a misogynist book. It's a bigoted book in a lot of ways, but it's especially misogynist because Henry Miller, he felt most deeply hurt by the women in his life, and so he used the power of language that he had to most deeply hurt the women in his life. Remember, these characters were all drawn from real people. He did this to sort of defend himself, to build a suit of armor against self-reflection so he wouldn't have to look within and analyze himself for who he really was. I realize this gets really deep into psychoanalysis, and psychoanalyzing a dead man is a fruitless procedure, but I'm having a lot of fun doing it, so why not? And what's ironic to me is that not only do I think a feminist reading is possible of this novel, but I do think it helps propel the book forward into the future. Now, do you have to read it that way? Maybe you just enjoy amoral hedonist fantasy. Plenty of people certainly seem to. That's probably why GTA is going to be the only video game to come out this year. Am I recommending that you read Tropic of Cancer? Am I really recommending that you look out and try to find for yourselves the work of a deluded egomaniac whose life was one long search for the next blowjob? I don't know. Maybe you hate the very idea. Maybe you hate me for discussing it and you're not going to look at it at all. Or maybe you already love Tropic of Cancer and you hate me for discussing it in the wrong way. Well, folks, that's all out of my reach. I don't have any real interest in controlling those reactions. All I do know is that I'm the captain. And the captain's got a need for some grog. So if you happen to be a Parisian prostitute who's free on Sunday next week, there's a cafe right over there and we can talk about books again!